The film starts with a story, and the story is of me going into my mother's bedroom in 1967. I was 17 years old. It was nighttime, and saying to my mother, "I'm going to go upstairs now and take an overdose of sleeping pills." And she looks up from her book. She's already in bed, ready to go to sleep, and she says, "Good night, dear." And even then I was taken aback. And the question you've asked me is, had she reacted differently, might I have done something differently? Might things have turned out differently? What in fact happened at that moment is that I went upstairs and I thought, I have to do what I said I was going to do. And I went into our medicine cabinet and I took out all the tranquilizers and all the sleeping pills that were there, and I swallowed them. And then I became really scared. Like, what had I done? And I looked in the mirror and I thought, you know what? Either I'll die, which is okay, or I won't, and then maybe somebody will do something to help me. If my mother had responded differently, there's no question in my mind that that evening the outcome would have been different. But I don't think that would have changed anything in the long run, because something much more fundamental had to change. And her responding differently that night would not have been that fundamental change. I was picked up in an ambulance, and I could tell from the two young guys who were my age, by the way they were behaving, that I was going someplace really bad. But there's bad and then there's worse. And when I arrived at the building and I said goodbye to these two boys with their sunburns, doing their summer job, and I went inside that building, it got a whole lot worse. I knew from the first minute I entered those buildings that I was in a place where anybody could do anything to me and nobody would ever be the wiser, that I was unprotected, or at least that's how I felt. And a lot of what I've found out in making the film confirms those impressions about the kind of danger that patients lived in. I was sitting on the floor in the day room because there was no place else to sit. There were no chairs. I was sitting on the floor in the day room, which is where the patients are during the day. And it came to me, just let go. You have to surrender to what is. You cannot think about what may happen. You cannot regret what you've done. You must just be here. And out of that, this feeling of peace came to me, which is a peace of acceptance. It's not resignation, it's acceptance. It's really different. And that was the foundation of how I managed to live through what I had to live through. I mean, when you ask me, would I be alive today if I hadn't been hospitalized over that period of time, I can't possibly know the answer to that, but I do think there's a significant chance that I wouldn't have been. I think that that night when I took that overdose of sleeping pills, if I had not been hospitalized, I think it was just a matter of time till I tried again and again. And whether by accident or by intention, I would have destroyed myself. Now, does that mean we need places like Kings Park to keep people alive? No. There are many other things that might have kept me alive, but I didn't have access to those things. Not back then, not in my life. When I first went out to Kings Park and I stood on the grounds of the hospital, I looked around at this boarded up place that had once been teeming with people. I mean, there were over 5,000 people in the hospital when I was there, and there were close to 10,000 at its height. And I asked immediately, where did everybody go? I didn't know. When they closed down the state hospitals, there was an understanding that the money that was saved, the huge amount of money that would be saved by closing these hospitals down, would be put into community mental health care. There would be housing, there would be clinics, there would be services, there would be treatment, and still money would be saved. But that never happened, ever. And so people who didn't have families to return to, who didn't have someplace to go like I did, were in essence tossed out. So you hear story after story of someone being let go in the middle of the night, you know, dropped off in Manhattan after 50 years of hospitalization with a token and a prescription and a few bucks. What do you think happened to that person? So over time what has happened is that a lot of people ended up homeless, a lot of people died, and a lot of people ended up in jail. You know, in the making of this film, the group of us who made this movie, have talked many times about the goals of this film. And for me personally, it was a journey of healing. I did this for myself. I wanted to heal from the past. But for the audience, I want the same thing, personally. I hope that the film has a healing message, because I think all of us have parts of ourselves that we have disowned, and parts of ourselves that we have locked away. And we pay a price for that, in a lack of compassion for ourselves and for other people. But I also think that this is a film that can very much impact how scared people are of mental illness, because it is made from within the system. This is not a film about people with mental illness. This is a film by a person with mental illness, by a person who's been in a state hospital, by a person who has gone through this experience. And so I think it is a film that can lessen stigma, lessen fear, that can cause people to stop when they're looking at somebody, and instead of withdrawing, just stop for a moment and say, this is another person.